Divorce isn't just an emotional roller coaster, it's a financial one too. Navigating life after a split can feel like rebuilding a puzzle with missing pieces. But what if the right planning could make this transition smoother, even set you up for a financial success? Today, we have family lawyer Chantal McCollum here to share expert advice on how to take control of your finances and future after divorce. Whether you're in the middle of the process or just came out the other side, you won't want to miss this essential conversation on post-divorce planning. Stay tuned.
Wake up, it's time to rise. Talking money with sharp insight. Jim and Ryan here to guide. Mastering the money ride. Saving stacks and planning dreams. Living large by honest means. Tune in now for the schemes. Breaking down financial themes. Money mindset every day.
I just love that tune so much. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Money Mindset Mastery podcast. I'm your host, Jim Leo, and joining me today is my co-host, Ryan Genoe. Ryan, how are you today?
I'm good. We're going to go on a roller coaster, as explained in the opening, because I think this is one of the biggest subjects when some clients talk to us of emotions, of all the things that they're going through. And again, it was great to find somebody to be able to come in and have this conversation with us, because we want to bring in people that can speak to it intelligently, unlike you and me, Jim, when it comes to this. So.
You're absolutely right. So today we are joined by a special guest, an intelligent special guest, family lawyer Chantal McCollum. Chantal, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Jim and Ryan. I think you're putting too much pressure on me right from the start.
Well, let's take some of that pressure off. Yeah, well, you know what, Ryan and I, we wanted to do this podcast and talk about this topic because depending on what side you're on, fortunately or unfortunately, the reality is people do go through separation and divorce. And one of the questions that Ryan and I get asked is, when is a good time for us to start the retirement plan? Many times people will reach out to us as they're going through the process of going through the divorce, and there's a lot of variables and things up in the air as well. So we usually encourage them to reach out to us. However, really the planning can't start until everything is pretty much complete and finalized. So we wanted to bring you in today as a family lawyer who's experienced these situations with many clients and kind of help out individuals with what to expect as you're going through the separation of the divorce process, to prepare them for when they reach the point where then they're ready to reach out to wealth advisors like Ryan and myself, where then we can step in, take over, and assist them with any of their financial plans and retirement planning needs. So why don't we start off, Chantal, with giving us a bit of background and ultimately how you ended up becoming a lawyer as well, out in the Niagara region, I should point out.
Okay, well, I guess I should start with I'm from the Niagara region, so I think it made the most sense for me to have a practice here because I was raised in the Niagara region. So, of course, from a client perspective, you have a lot of connections and your network is sort of located where you were sort of, where you came from. So it seemed the most logical way. I'm actually from little city called Thorold, which is just south of St. Catharines. It's its own city, but it's a great place to work actually, and it's come a long way since I actually attended a high school down the street. It's kind of weird to be coming full circle and practicing, where you were sort of in high school. But I really love Thorold, and it's a great place to work. I came to be a lawyer in a very strange way. I've been a lawyer for about 5 years, but I actually had a science background, and I did sciences, and then I did environmental engineering, a master's degree. I never was a professional engineer, but I did study the subject. Then I worked in the consulting industry, and I had a legal issue, and I liked my lawyer so much that I thought, hey, I think I would like to do that. And so it wasn't even family law. It was employment law. But I just, it was sort of a situation and where I sort of found a mentor in a way. And yeah, so that's sort of how that happened. It's a bit of a weird road, but in some ways, I find my background in sciences is really helpful for what I do because there's a lot of logic in the way that you approach the law. So it almost it lends itself to me doing this job, I find. So but even though it's a very different career path, it seems to work really well. So that's the sort of short story, long version of how that happened. But here we are. So
And specifically in family law, what drew you to practicing family law?
well, actually, when I was in law school, I worked at a firm in St. Catharines, and I was a summer student there. And I was introduced to one of the partners who was a family lawyer there, who was fantastic. He then became my articling principal, so it's sort of like your lawyer apprenticeship training. His name's Bruce McDonald, and he was such a great mentor. I thought, well, Bruce seems to really like doing this, and he's been doing this for a really long time, and he's really good at it. And so, again, it was just sort of a mentorship situation, I think, where it sort of led me to it. The other part about family law is that there's a huge need for it. It seems like I do other areas of practice in other areas of law. However, most of the clients have this need, especially because I am located in a smaller locale. I mean, some lawyers in larger cities may specialize, and of course that's really good because you are focused and an expert in a particular area of law, and I would say most of the work I do is family law, based on a lot of need. But so that's another part of it. But the interesting thing about it is that family law sounds like it might be kind of a simple, I guess, area of law, but it's complicated because there are varying aspects of it. You're dealing with a sort of accounting financial exercise, right? And there's a lot of complications when you just get into the subject of spousal support, for example. There's a lot of academic experts working on this in this subject area, but there's also the issue of like you said, there's a lot of emotions. So there are you're going to be dealing with who's making decisions, or for your children, and you're also determining where are your children going to be. And there's so many variables because it depends on how old your children are. It depends on it. Every family is unique, really. Every client is different, so you can't really just formulaically make decisions. It's all very customized. That makes it a really interesting area of law. And you're really working with people and trying to allow them to move forward. That is the key part of it is there's a lot of, there can be some mudslinging that goes on, right? And the way I see it is my job is to sort of allow people to get that out, because that's part of the process. It is, although I'm not a therapist, we do hear things, right? It's part of the job, and I'm sure you do as well in your job. But you almost have to try to get people to say, okay, we know this is happening, but how do you go into the future so that you're doing the best things, of course, for your finances, but I mean, your children, right? So that's one of the big challenges.
Do you ever encourage mediation when going through this process? Is that typically better for couples? Because I know when I've sat down with clients and they have said that they're going to work on splitting their assets on their own, it never works out well. And usually I suggest they go through the mediation route, but it very rarely does for whatever reason. So what's your opinion on mediation over hiring a lawyer for each side?
Well, again, I think it goes back to what's going to work the best for the parties and the family. I definitely encourage people to mediate, even if, say, it's not in my interest as a lawyer. I might not, you know, I might lose a client over it. But the reality is, I'm trying to figure out what is the best thing for that family. That's really my goal. Like, someone comes in and I think, okay, depending on what they say, I will say to people, look, if you're able to move past some of the conflict, and you're able to sort of, you know, get along with your ex-spouse. And even if you don't, I mean, there's sometimes ways that mediators can find solutions. I've actually started training to become a family mediator, although I have a way to go on that, because anything that can work to reduce conflict is good. And I think it's the most important thing, because, ultimately, I mean, who wants to spend your child's education fund on a lawyer? I mean, I always say to people, or your retirement fund, or whatever it is. It's if you can minimize your cost and find a way to work on something and move forward, it can work. There are a number of files that just doesn't work. Mediation can't work. Sometimes, though, I'm very lucky that I have a really collegial sort of law association that I work within, and most often it's possible to, even if we just work on. So I'm representing a party, for example, and there's another lawyer locally that's representing a party. I've worked with lawyers even outside of the geographical area here. And it's always a pleasure when you can work with a lawyer who's reasonable and trying to get their client there. And I'm trying to do that. That can also be very effective and keep costs down. Mediation, obviously, the whole idea would be that you're dealing with one person that isn't going to be giving legal advice to people, because it's supposed to be driven by the parties. But the idea would be, generally, depending, that most of the time you'd be sharing the cost of a mediator, and that alone is pretty powerful, because you're already reducing what you're spending. If you're getting a lawyer to represent you, you're by already spending all of that money on just the lawyer. Sometimes lawyers are involved with it. It can be effective too to try mediation, and then and most mediators and should have encouraged their clients to have their agreements reviewed by a lawyer. So that can also help. And then I think that's even better, because then you can ensure that the party's getting advice, and to make them feel more confident about what they've maybe decided to do. But really, I mean, if you're able to control the process and control what you see your family's life looking like going forward, that's the best. Because if you end up in litigation, it's like we say, it sounds like an old sort of, I guess, an old adage that, you could end up with a judge deciding your life, and they don't know you. They don't know you, and your lawyer gets to know you, but not in the way that you would know what's best for yourself. So if you can be in control, that's great.
Now, one of the challenges, as I mentioned in the beginning, that Ryan and I have is when we meet with one of the two parties and they're preparing to go through the process, and they tell us, well, I know I'm going to get the house, and I know I'm going to get most of the pension, and I know I'm going to get this and that and whatever. So put together a retirement plan for me based on what I'm going to receive. And usually I ask the question, well, how do you know you're going to end up with those things? Well, that's just what I've kind of figured I'm owed, right? And I'm like, well, it's very different until you actually go through the process, and you might be surprised ultimately what you might come out with. It might be more, but in many cases it's less, right?
Right. Expectations, right?
Yeah. So in terms of dividing assets, what should people be aware of when they're going through the process of divorce?
Okay, so I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, the first the first step and the most tedious and time consuming step, really, for many, at least at least one of the most tedious and time consuming steps, is just the full disclosure that happens. So uh, you really want, and I really encourage people and they are meant to, because the law is designed this way, is to make sure that you're disclosing everything that you have. Even if you think, I mean, I would suggest to people, even if you think that we don't need to know, it's probably better to tell us that you have something. Because it may, I don't know, it could be something that you might not think of, but something that's, it could be a material thing like a car where we sort of assign a value. But then when you think of the term property, like people often think that's my house, right? They think this, but when we say property, what we're talking about is a bank account. It's a pension. It's an RSP. It's a GIC. It's an RE, like, we're even just RESPs will disclose, even though they're sort of beneficial for your kids. But any asset that you had, on the date of marriage, assuming you're married, because there obviously are common law situations as well, depending on, but I won't get into that now. But let's assume for a marriage, you're looking at all of these things that are accumulated during the relationship. So that can, like, it can be a number of things, and we want to know what all the value of those things is on the date of separation, or what we call the valuation date. So really, I mean, giving full disclosure is painful and very unfun, and will be the part of the process that we would get the most complaints about. But it is the most, once you get that done out of the way, then you can start figuring out, okay, here's what we have and here's what we're working with. Now let's figure out what we can do with it. So, I mean, that's what I would say. I mean, there's one of the big issues in the courts is people's failure to give full disclosure, either because sometimes it's inadvertence. Like, to be fair, someone might not have thought of something, but there are situations where it's intentional, right? I want to hurt my ex-spouse and I'm not giving that up, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the asset could be in, you know, France, but you have to disclose it, even though there's, maybe it may not be a jurisdiction or we might not have the jurisdiction over that asset, but you just have to say, here's what I have. Most people know what each party has. But sometimes, that there's situations where they don't. But so you have to make sure that you are giving up that disclosure. And I am one of those lawyers, and I have excellent law clerks that will find out that you have something, and it will go into your statement. And ultimately, that is the one of the best things you can do to avoid more costly litigation, is to make sure you've given that disclosure. So it's a bit of a long-winded story, but that's really, really important when it comes to your separation.
And how are you able to verify or confirm that someone, for example, who's withheld information on an asset that they may hold, is there a method for you as a lawyer to try to uncover those potential assets that someone may be withholding from disclosure?
Sure. I mean, it's like I said, it's usually the case where it's sort of if you're representing the one spouse, and they'll say, wait a minute, they'll get the financial statement and say, no, that's not, there are other things here that we that haven't been disclosed. Of course. I mean, one of the things you will try to do is, hopefully, we try to deal with it outside the courtroom. I mean, if there's a way, for example, if both parties are represented by lawyers, or even if they're not, you do your best to say, hey, look, we need this disclosure. But if that breaks down and you can't get that, then of course you have the opportunity to litigate if you have to. Like I said, we try not to, but sometimes it's the only way to ensure to have that happen. So of course there's various, without getting into the weeds on it, but there's various procedures that can be utilized within the court system to get that to happen. And there's obviously built-in conferences. Like, I mean, the family law system has mandatory off the record, court record conference steps so that the parties are encouraged to settle and have an open discussion on settlement. And there's more than one opportunity to do that. And sometimes there's even 2 or 3 or more opportunities to do that kind of thing, to get the parties together with a judge present who can give them an opinion without it being so expensive and hotly litigated. And so but if there's a refusal, there are definitely mechanisms to require an order that be done.
So by people not having their stuff organized, again, we collect information from clients as part of our process to eventually become smoother for them down the line too, because everything's in order. But again, you said that very early on, which is by delaying this stuff, you're really just costing yourself the money that you think in your mind you're saving by sticking it to the other person on the other side.
Yes.
You're really just flushing that money down the toilet even more.
For sure.
Without just moving on with your life, right? And I guess
for sure,
and we hear it all the time. And again, there's a bunch of things we do as wealth advisors, and psychologist seems to be labeled under one of them at some point.
Definitely.
And I will always reference great movies, quotes, and stuff like that. But it was a Ted Lasso episode. With Ted Lasso, and he talks about, like, especially when you have kids, like, you're going to raise grandchildren with this person. So as far as the mental health side of healthily moving on, is that why drag this on and create this for yourself instead? Make it a smoother process. And again, there's the logical side of things when it comes to thing, and it's very hard on the emotional side, hearing stories from people. But again, your science background will help in the logic piece of moving people forward with that. So
yeah, well, as with you both with a financial background, right? It's similar in the way of approaching. Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, it's the time that if you're spent focused on what your ex-spouse or partner or whatever is doing, and that we're often going, and it sounds like you're doing the same, where you're going, okay, well, let's just focus over here on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and you do the things your lawyer and your financial advisors tell you to do, I think it puts you in a good position, because you're instead of, oh, she did that, he did that, they did that, blah blah blah. You're over here, and you're because you're moving forward, and you're like you say, you're spending. It's really in your own interest, because you are going to be able to move forward in the best way possible if you can do those things. It's true. Yeah.
Now, it's a sticky subject too, and understanding the support payments like child support and spousal support. How do people get an accurate idea of what they could expect when incorporating it into, like, us trying to do a financial plan?
So with support, yeah, because that's always, I guess, in the back of somebody's mind, and I'm often telling clients that you can't know that until you have all the disclosure done. So people are worried about that unknown, or the unpredictability of what might that be over here later on, but you really can't until you know about what that person's income looks like, and it's always in flux, right? Because people's incomes change every year, so there's the ongoing requirement of disclosure, but that is all dependent upon what you receive from the disclosure. And then again, it's with child support often will use the child support guidelines. Typically, we use the child support guidelines. That's all prescribed by the Divorce Act. If you're, again, I'm using an example of being married. This would also apply to people who have children who are not married. It's a mix of federal and provincial law, although they have in effect the same. They're in effect the same thing, because the province will base its guidelines on the federal government's guidelines. But it's just making sure that you have a little bit of a basic knowledge. One of the things that people can do is they can do a bit of reading. One of the resources that's really good on this subject would be Clio. I don't know if you have heard of Clio, or if you've recommended your clients to go to it. Yeah, I mean that's something that anybody could go and look at. So this is a very good legal education source. So it's in the way that it's broken down is very good and step by step, so people can understand the concepts. But really, I mean, it's sort of there's different combinations. So one very simple example would be if children are most of the time, I mean, there's nuances to this, but say most of the time with one parent, that other parent would be the payor parent. In terms of their regular monthly child support obligations, you would look at again, I'm simplifying things, but you would look at someone's notice of assessment. What was their income? And there's the guidelines, and there's, again, the federal government website. You can calculate based on what province you're in, how many children do you have, that you're paying child support for, and that will give you at least an idea, on an idea of what it is that you will have to pay the other party. But there's various other sort of scenarios that could arise. I mean, it depends again on where children are most of the time, and then you get into the idea of special and extraordinary expenses, and what do those entail, and how do we divide those up? But those again are, you can get, like I said, probably if you wanted to get a sort of rough estimate, and if you're concerned about uncertainty, you could look it up online. Like I said, the federal government website, or looking to Clio to guide you on how to do that. That can give you a little bit of knowledge, which I think is always a little bit of power when you're not sure how that's all going to work out. So hopefully, I don't know if I got off subject, Ryan, with your question, but that sort of can help. Spousal support is more complicated. So, but yeah.
Well, just like us, it's important for education, right? And the more you have your ducks in a row, the smoother the process can go, and that you can move forward, right? And working with a wealth advisor in general, and getting the right information from the beginning, instead of finding your sources from, all these weird means, or potentially somebody who is trying to be emotionally involved, which can carry on.
A friend, a well-meaning friend or family member, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a well-meaning friend or family member, right? And, and just making sure that you can come to somebody that is going to be logical through it and move you through it, and save you money in the long run, really, by moving through the process quite quickly. And then, for us, when it comes to the financial planning side, obviously, hopefully you're working with somebody long before you do that, and it makes life a little bit easier to move forward. But also that we can bring in people to help you after a divorce, especially once all the proceedings are done and all the agreements are signed. We can get even more clarification, because we always say, I at least say, make me part of your top 5, right? Okay. Top 5 people you call when it comes to like a major change in your financial plan, because it's fluid, it's ever changing.
Always,
right? And this is a major bump in the road for a lot of people. So, and how we can help guide you to potentially get you back on track a lot sooner than dragging it down the road. And that's one of the things that I think the difference that I've seen with clients that come to us early on that start gathering the information and helping themselves save money. And then we can get people back on track based on the information that's then coming to us kind of live. Because I find there are clients that, I guess, divorce is not a great thing and don't want to take some time, but sometimes that can push the problem down the road without really just bringing it to an expert that can walk you through it logically and help you start taking those small steps at a time. So,
yeah, I think
definitely
searching for professionals to help you, as opposed to, again, the well-meaning friend or family member. They are well-meaning. The problem is that they're just as angry and upset as you are. So really what they do is they just add more fuel to that emotional fire, right? So sometimes it is nice to just separate yourself and deal with a third-party individual who's not emotionally involved in the situation and can, look at things from a different perspective, from a different angle. And then going to the topic of, or the example of the child support or spousal support, going back to what Ryan was saying, to provide people an expectation in terms of how Ryan and I are able to help them, we will start gathering the data as you're going through the process. Unfortunately, we can't really give you any form of recommendation because if you're the payer of the spousal or child support, you don't know what your bottom line is going to look like. So from a cash flow point of view, we can't really help you until you know what those numbers are. And on the flip side, as the receiver of that income, again, it's very difficult to plan around that until we have final numbers. So sometimes we do have clients coming to us saying, well, we want the plan now and we want to know what the future is going to look like. It's like, we can't help you until we actually have all the information that we need. So we have to put a pause on this until we get to that, to those end numbers, right?
Right.
Ryan, would you agree with that? I mean, we've dealt with that as well with people, and their expectation is they want answers now. And it's like, we can't provide them answers right away until we have the information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find there's a lot of institutions that are like promising the crystal ball of what that post-retirement looks like, but it's a puzzle missing 5 or 6 major pieces that can't help that person. But again, we can have a lot of those things lined up for people ready to go instead of just adding another big thing that you have to do later. But instead, as I always say, best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So if we have some of those things as it comes through, we're very active in making sure that those things stay up to date. So that's why we're part of the top 5 list for people.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Can I ask you guys a question? Would you get, for example, once a lawyer or mediator, for example, would prepare financial statement, would you have your clients, I assume, would you have them come in with that? Would that help you to do what you do for clients? So like the disclosure that's provided and assembled, would that help you to move to, or would you do it on your own? You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, you have financial statement, or sometimes there's like the at least in Ontario, there's a Form 13 or Form 13.1 that people put together. Sometimes it's just a disclosure, a list. Is that something that you would go through to formulate a plan for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's very helpful to have that information. Usually we encourage our clients to input the data in the planning program that we set them up on, right? So usually there's a link, they register, because then what will happen is when they log into the portal and we complete the plan, they'll be able to log in at any time and actually see their final retirement plan, financial plan. And then as we meet with them throughout the years and we go through the progress report, we update that information. And again, they'll be able to log in to view it. So we usually encourage people to input the data from the link that we send. However, we also recognize that if they already have that financial statement, it's all there. We can assist with the process of inputting that information into the portal for them.
Okay. So yeah,
And
you're
then
using a lot of tech. Yeah.
and on the group side too, we're pulling information from, TVH mortgages, TVH accounting, right? And we're
Okay.
able to, depending on what the person is, all the information. Again, examples of, when we work with clients that are looking to either renew a mortgage or perhaps buy a new home, it's very
Right.
easy because we've collected all the data. So it's really here's the present. It's done. You've done all the hard work already without realizing it. So yeah,
Yeah,
we're very smooth that way.
yeah, and I find where we really are able to be helpful with clients is usually what we find in a marriage. You have one partner who's taking care of the finances, and the other partner not so much. And
Sure.
when we're dealing with a partner who's never really dealt with the finances, and now they're responsible with dealing with a mortgage renewal, mortgage financing, a tax return, contributions to RSPs,
Yeah.
they just really don't have an understanding of where to go because their former partner was handling all that. So again,
Right.
in house, we have the team that if you've never dealt
Right.
with a mortgage renewal or mortgage financing, well, we have someone in house that can assist you with that process. If you've never filed a tax return and all you've ever done is
Right.
sign one, again, we have someone in house that can also help you with that process. And if you've never invested money before or understand how that all works, well, we have in-house wealth management solutions as well, right?
Right.
So we
Break it down.
are very
Hmm.
helpful with someone who has never gone through that process. And even from a cash flow point of view, people who have never worked on their finances, well, now they don't really understand their cash flow and spending and their
Hmm.
income. Well, that's again another process that Ryan and I help our clients with is to walk through that process for them. So they have a better understanding of, okay, here's what you're going to be spending every single month. Here's what's coming in. Do we need to make any adjustments? Just to give them, again, that education to go through that process.
Which means peace of mind for a lot of people too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
A lot of security for a process that's scary, unknown for many. I mean, some people have been through it before, but most of the time people come, at least to me, and I'm assuming to you, having gone through this, and so you're really educating and working with people through
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Absolutely.
I
So
have
what
that's where my law
are
clerks come in. So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
you know, I was just going to ask from a retirement planning post divorce. I know I asked you this question when we did our planning, and your response was, well, you're going to have less than what you originally thought you were going to have. Right. So would you say that
Yeah.
that's one of the major impacts of planning for retirement post divorce? Is having
I
less?
Yeah, I think so, probably. And I think, yeah, we did talk about that. And it sounds like that's what you both will observe with your clients. Definitely having less is, you're most of the time you're going from two incomes, not always, but most of the time, and to one, and trying to figure out how to navigate that, and obviously the retirement part of things is where you guys come in, but yeah, like it's trying to figure that out, and one of the things at least I notice is, and I think we talked about this as well before, was that the idea that the cost of living is so much bigger now that people are delaying the actual separation, physical separation. It's an observation that I maybe you're seeing. At least from the beginnings of a separation, it's taking a while for that to for people to figure out what they're going to do. And sometimes that can be a really tense situation if you're really not getting along. But definitely, yeah, the retirement planning aspect is, I think, where we would sort of end. Here's what we have, and then you're going to say, we're going to say, here's what we have, and you're going to say, here's what we have, and now how do we move what does that look like in the future?
And
So
is a client provided with some form of summary of here's the assets that you're going to end up with, here's the income you're going to be paying or receiving? Is there a summary that's presented to a client, and then that's something they can forward to Ryan and I?
yeah, so what when I first started law practice, I found it humorous that most lawyers refer to software, as you guys have probably heard of, called DivorceMate. There are other software sort of out in the market that's sort of emerging, but most of the time, the people are using what's called DivorceMate, and DivorceMate is does contain sort of models, right? So once you get all the disclosure, you can then sort of start to look at, okay, what are your child support payments? What are your spousal support payments going to look like? It might look like a lump sum for some people. That's depending on their circumstances, sometimes the best thing for them. But it does contain a sort of calculator where you can, even for support, if you are going to go for a lump sum, for example, you're going to get it's going to discount, and it's going to make tax considerations for you. But I'm not a tax lawyer, right? And I would rely on tax planners and people like specialists like yourself to look at what that might be. But there's definitely something that we can provide. That's definitely true. That as a lawyer who's gone through and inputted all the detailed financial information, sort of from tax returns and what have you, and maybe run some scenarios as well, looking at different situations so that you have a pretty good overview of what a range could look like. That's something that a client might want to look at and be able to take to yourselves, for example. That might assist you. I don't know if you've had I'm assuming you've seen some of that, and I don't know if it's been any assistance to you.
No, I've never heard of that before. So
Okay.
that's new. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it could be, and the reason for it, and this is actually going to lead my next question for you, because I've noticed in my client base when
Mm-hmm.
I'm approached by clients who are going through a divorce, I would say 90% would be considered gray divorces,
Yeah.
10%
Wow.
more on the younger
Yeah.
side, right? And I think it could be just the nature of my client base.
Yeah.
So many of them are not really technically savvy and wouldn't really use a lot of those tools, and that could be the reason. But are you seeing the same
Sure.
thing on your end? Is it more of our client based situation, or are you seeing more gray divorces right now?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I think in the last year, I have had people come into my office who are definitely post retirement, and they're going through divorces, and those can be challenging in this sense that if the spousal support issue is on the table, which often in very long marriages it is, that can make the situation a little bit more complex. Often you're not dealing with, okay, how are we going to deal with children, because your children are either, or if you have children, they're typically already adults, and that's not an issue. But spousal support can definitely be a big issue, as is dividing your property. But I am seeing that happening more often. And as a lawyer, I mean, I think by nature, we're often brought in because people are dealing with the issues of children, and how are we going to parent children? How are we going to look at that? So I do get a lot of people of sort of, I guess, a younger generation, but you're definitely right. I have seen that. Yeah, and it's a challenge, and but it's an interesting challenge, at least from a legal perspective, to try to figure out how people move forward from when they're in retirement, for sure. Are you seeing, like, how are you finding that? Are you finding people are is it more difficult, do you think, at that age for people, or is it it's different, right?
From a financial point of view, it is more difficult. The reason for the gray divorce with a lot of the clients has been they've been married for 20, 25 years. Kids have moved on, out of the house, and they realize that they're different people now, and they just don't get
Right.
along, right?
Right.
And that's what's kind of caused the gray divorce. But I do find when you're younger going through a divorce, you still have time to recover financially. When
Sure.
you're already retired, I have seen some people who've been forced to go back to work where they maybe hadn't worked throughout
Yeah.
their entire marriage. And
Yes.
now there's a need for them to go to work because financially everything again has been split a certain way, and retirement is not a pleasant thing for them any longer,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it has become a little bit more challenging from a financial point of view, for sure. But I am seeing more of that now. Yeah.
And not getting political, but pensions are very important for people, aren't they? Like, I mean, if people have a pension, it really puts them in I think, a very different position.
It does, but even with pensions right now, like a lot of private corporations are moving away from defined benefit plans.
Sure.
So now we're dealing
Costly.
with defined contribution plans. A lot of private corporations, I would say, when I first started in the industry 35 years ago, 85% of private corporations offered some form of pension plan.
Right.
Now the number I believe is like 42%, so it's not as common, right? So really, the vast amount or the wealth of most of the clients that we're dealing with is tied into their principal residence
Right.
and RSP contributions. And
Sure.
then when you have people who have invested a certain way and they've lost 20, 30, 40% of the value of the RSP, because then what happens is when they're going through that divorce and the splitting of the assets, they want to try to make up some of those losses from the split. And they tend to take greater risks, which is
Okay.
against our recommendation. And sometimes
Okay.
greater risk also means potentially greater losses. And they put
Right.
themselves in an even worse situation than before, right?
Right. And as you're
And
getting older, you don't want to take that risk. Yeah.
yeah, but they do because they think, well,
They
I've
do.
lost 50% of the account, and the only way
Yep.
for me to recover that is by trying to shoot for that 12% per year return, which means
Okay.
it's a lot of risk,
A lot of risk.
and yeah, it's not
Yep.
advisable, right? So we're definitely seeing that. But you're right, pensions are helpful, but they're not common like they used to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So I think
Interesting.
we're going to start closing things up because it's been 48 minutes. It hasn't felt that way.
Oh yeah. No,
Um,
no. Just go on and
and
on
we
and
could
on and
probably
on.
keep going, and we could probably keep going, right? But
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
probably start shutting it down. And if we want to have a follow up, we'd love to have you back on a follow up. So, Chantal, any final pieces of advice that you can share with people out there that are listening or watching right now?
Well, it probably isn't far from what Jim or Ryan might tell your clients. It is I would just say, listen to your advisors, listen to your lawyer. We're here to help you, put you point you in the right direction. And with it's overwhelming. Obviously, what everyone's going through in these scenarios. But again, it's like Ryan said, what was it about the elephant? I'm going to
Yeah,
get it
one bite
wrong.
at
I'm
a
going to say
time.
something. Yeah, I'm going to say
Best.
something about biting an elephant. It's totally wrong. Completely messed it up.
Yeah.
What is it's take it step by step. You're obviously going to be worried and overwhelmed, but we're going to guide you, and you're going to do this one step at a time. And it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to be unpleasant. But if you do follow it, little bits, and we do it in an organized manner, like you said, same thing. It can really, really help you to be able to move forward, right? So, yep. Just again, I like to say, just listen to sound advice, and you'll be probably put in a good stead. So.
And Ryan, any final questions or comments you'd like to make?
I think it's just finding the right people in your corner, surrounding yourself with people that aren't going to be emotional about this very large decision you're making, and going through the process in a way that is going to find the right answers that are going to move you forward. That's going to save you a lot of money, a lot of time and headache. And as you kind of said from the beginning, allowing yourself to take those first steps moving forward, and starting the next chapter of your life, and starting, in our cases, working with people with what they now have as part of their financial plan, and how we can get them back on track sooner than later. And by delaying the process, it only delays your retirement. It only delays your headache and mental well-being. And yeah, that's it.
And Chantal, if someone's looking for your expertise, how can they find you?
They can, I guess the easiest way would be to visit my website, which would be McCollumLawyer.com. I should add an S to it and never got around to it because I started as a sole practitioner, and then I keep thinking every day I should put an S on that because I do have a lawyer I work with as well. But if you go to McCollumLawyer.com, and you can see my spelling of my last name and the word lawyer, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And I have like a form on my website if anybody wants to send an inquiry through my website. But of course, you can just people feel pretty comfortable in making a call. It's a little bit more personal, and we can go from there.
And Ryan, how can people find us?
Oh,
big test time.
How do we find you?
I failed this last time. I know TVH Financial.ca, but the phone number
647
last time.
647-727-4668. Again, we're on all the social media platforms as well. This will be posted on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and LinkedIn and all those wonderful things. We do send it out as a blog post as well. So for your readers, you can go through the blog post itself. For you listeners, we do have the podcast version for people who love video, and we seem to have a big attraction on the video side of things. It will be on YouTube. So finally, what I'd like to say is, divorce can feel like it is the end, right? But with the right financial tools, it's a new beginning. So
for sure,
if you or someone you know is navigating life after a split, share this episode with them, because it just might be the financial reset that they need. So I've really enjoyed this session. Again, I think we probably could have gone another hour at the very least. But Chantal, Ryan and I are very thankful that you've joined us. We really appreciate your time. And I really do encourage people that if you are looking for an expert in family law, reach out to Chantal and her team, and they'd be able to help you throughout the process in a very measured, kind way as well. Because I think, like you said, Chantal, it's an uncomfortable situation. But if you're dealing with people who are kind, just as yourself as well, and professional, you can help, kind of soften a little bit of that uncomfortable feeling, right? So yeah, we absolutely encourage people to reach out to you. So thank you very much, everyone. And until next time, I think, Ryan, we've got another episode coming up next week as well.
We do.
Right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So
great.
Look out for that next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Starting strong, we're here today. Jim and Ryan lead the way. Talking money every day. Mastering the mind's array. Dreams of wealth within our sight. Building futures burning bright. Financial talk that feels just right. Learning, grow, rise to new heights. Money mindset, mastery time. Listen close and climb the lifeline. From the dollar to the dime. Your success, it will be prime. questions answered with a grin. Saving smart to win the win. Investing gold that's deep within. Every journey's where we begin. Balance books and watch them grow. Insight shared to make you glow. Financial wisdom here to show. Step by step on with the flow. Money mindset mastery time. Listen close and climb the line. Find from the dollar to the dime. Your success, it will be prime.